Hey everyone, welcome back to Atypical Understanding, where we dive into the things that make us and others tick. We share our journeys and what we are learning about, how to improve our lives, and become the change we want to see and have the impact that we crave. This is a continuation on the Emotion Wheel series. The challenge with emotional work is that emotions are useful and they are meant to protect us. But in order to do that, we really need to understand them. The problem really arises when the emotion becomes misused, misunderstood, overactive. So in these videos, we're really seeking to find that balance again. We're seeking to find our emotional regulation. We're trying to reconnect with the definitions of the words, the true meanings of the emotions, so that we can start to uncover what the emotions are telling us, but also uncover when they're out of sorts or when they're out of place. Disgust is a perfect example of an emotion that tends to go out of whack for people because of external factors. Disgust is very protective. When we think of something like expired milk, it's really obvious how we develop this kind of avoidance of things, this protective avoidance of things. We smell the milk, or we drink the milk, even worse, and we say yuck, and we avoid it. And then obsessively from then on, for a while, we'll check milk before we drink it, and we'll smell it. And some of us, me, might avoid it altogether for a while. This is an example of disgust functioning properly to protect us. Drinking spoiled milk can be very dangerous, so this is a very useful thing. Disgust becomes more problematic when we feel it in response to groups of people, individuals, situations, ourselves, based on misinformation or based on trying to protect ourselves from a non-existent threat. I see a lot of people experience disgust these days, and it's totally, in a lot of cases, being manipulated by people who have the power and the mouthpiece to manipulate our thoughts and emotions. And my political views are kind of in the middle, so that's not subconsciously directed at anybody. Just for clarification, I'm not trying to subconsciously direct things there. But our thoughts and emotions. So news outlets are bad for this, politicians, influencers, religious leaders, any type of marketing in general. Marketing's pretty bad. Usually relies heavily on getting you to disgust something so that you can buy something to fix it. I mean, think about in the 60s, there's been a lot of those ads recurring, body odor, toothpaste, went feminine hygiene type things. They really played heavily on disgust. Look at any advertising happening on TV now and see, is it playing on disgust? Probably. I think it's very important for us to learn how to recognize and understand and question our disgust so that we can deal with it in a very conscious manner. The manipulation of emotions is definitely a topic worth exploring later in more detail, but for today, I want to kind of switch back over to the breakdown of the emotions on the emotion wheel related to disgust. To better help us identify the disgust and to work through it in a way that is useful to us and others, and really help us decide if we need to hold on to this disgust or if maybe it's time to let it go. The definition of disgust is to provoke loathing or aversion. So we're going to dislike something or stay away. So if we disgust something, we're really going to try to avoid interacting with it. Or even we may try to fix it, but we don't want it. Okay, the next word in related to disgust was disapproving. To pass unfavorable judgment on or to refuse approval. I want to reiterate, refuse approval. One of the more terrible things that we do to people revolves around excluding them. The human needs to belong, not only for emotional well-being, but for the support and the ability to acquire the things that we need, the actual physical tools, the food, all of this stuff is kind of a group effort. survival really is a group effort often, especially in today's culture. So it isn't always possible for most of us to do all the things ourselves. We really need that community. So to be disapproving, to start to isolate yourself or others, can actually be very threatening to yours or others' well-being. We need to make sure that if we decide to isolate from a group or decide to, pull back, that this is something that's coming from a place of balance. Children who grow up in situations where they're regularly refused of approval tend to have very long-lasting emotional issues. It's something very difficult for them to work through. So it's really important to the well-being of our society and our children and our family and all of your relationships that if you're feeling disapproving of someone or something or yourself on a regular basis, you should explore that. Take some time, explore it, and try to figure out what the basis is. Is it something you were taught by someone, and did that person have an agenda, maybe? Or do you have some sort of personal experience there that you would prefer just not to repeat? There are situations that I don't want to discredit disapproval. Like, that's a very valid thing. The goal here is to decide, is this healthy, or why am I feeling this? Is it a healthy feeling, or is it a misconstrued feeling? Judgmental. Judgmental is related to this, but the definition is the process of forming an opinion by discerning or comparing. And for this, I wanted to look up discerning. Discerning means to detect with the eyes or the senses. To detect with the eyes or the senses. So I think the definition of discerning is a really big clue as to what is potentially wrong with being judgmental. Because you're not basing your judgments on facts or evidence, but based on your senses. Sometimes that can be a really, really great thing. I am all about using my intuition. I love my intuition. But I'm also aware that sometimes it has limitations, and sometimes it's just wrong. Especially in situations where we've been conditioned by someone with an agenda. Little things growing up, and my grandmother was very religious, and a lot of the things that she would kind of say with repetition, I would believe sometimes. And then later in life, I would question that, and I would be judgmental towards certain types of people, and I would see that later in life, and I was like, oh, yeah, that wasn't even something that I thought. It was just her repetition from her religious perspective that made me think these things about people that I don't actually believe. It was very, that's a very common example, I think. The problems arise when we refuse to look at the evidence because we've made these judgments in our head. So take a minute next time you're feeling judgmental about something and look up some facts. Try to find some proof of what you think. Please try to use it's hard sometimes, it's really hard, but try to find reputable and unbiased sources, or at least multiple sources. Or one thing that I like to do when I'm having trouble deciding if someone's biased or not, I'll actually go look at the extreme opinions. So if it's a political issue, I'll go extremely left and I'll go extremely right, and then I'll try to find some people in the middle to talk about the issue, and that kind of helps me see the broader picture. So you can do that with a lot of things. That's a helpful way to find less bias in your sources, because honestly, you can pretty much find proof on the internet of anything you want to find proof of. So in order to question judgments, though, we're really going to be fact-finding. We're going to be looking for proof. Anything that we could see or test ourselves, experiments that we can repeat ourselves are great. Those are really good ways to drive things home and make things believable to us, understandable. The next word is embarrassed. So this is showing or feeling a state of self-conscious confusion or distress. Distress. Pain or suffering affecting the body, a bodily part, or the mind. That's pretty intense. If you think about that, embarrassment, and then we're going to distress. Embarrassment is one of those emotions that's very widespread, and everyone feels it, and it's usually pretty intense for us when we do feel it. Think about like self-conscious confusion and pain, suffering, affecting the body and mind. I mean, that's just so like so much more, I think, than we think that when we say I'm embarrassed. We don't really think of what it really is. That's why these definitions are so helpful. Like confusion and pain and suffering. Yeah, that's pretty intense for a little emotion like embarrassment. Recognizing embarrassment in the moment is pretty easy. Most of us are pretty in tune with our embarrassment. But I really personally connected with embarrassment on another level when doing some trauma work and some trauma group work, even better, and connecting with it in relation to a past experiences and realizing that embarrassment still haunts me in certain situations. And it really places limitations on us that are not based on a realistic assessment of the current situation. So a lot of times you might walk into a situation and you're feeling embarrassed, but it has nothing to do with what's going on right now. It's from something in the past. So embarrassment is a feeling the body really remembers, and it can use to inhibit you from doing things. It's a protection, obviously, but the body sometimes is the brain is a little overprotected. So try it right now. Feel embarrassed. If that didn't work, think of something that makes you feel embarrassed. Think of something really that you did that you're just so embarrassed about. And just feel it for a minute. Feel what it feels like and get comfortable with it in the body. It's uncomfortable. Did you have any reaction to it? Did it make you want to do something protective, like put your hands across your chest, shrink back a little bit? Like, this is what I do when I feel embarrassed. Like, this is what I want to do. I feel that we're taught that embarrassment is like such a terrible bad and just this terrible thing. And it's something to be avoided at all costs, especially when you're younger. I think when you're in like high school age, college age, oh gosh, never be embarrassed, never make any mistakes, never mess up. So even if it means giving up your dreams just to not be embarrassed, how crazy is that? How crazy is it when you think about it? Give up your dreams because you don't want to be embarrassed. But it really isn't that bad. I mean, you are probably able to just now feel embarrassed for no reason at all, just on memory alone. So why does it hold so much power? Really, is it something to be ashamed of? It really is usually like a quick experience as far as you and the other person goes, or the audience goes. The majority of the people will forget about it. And quite frankly, people who use your embarrassing situations against you at a later date, I mean, a lot of times those relationships might need to be reconsidered. That's kind of one of those bullying tactics, one of those narcissistic personality trait type tactics that, it might be time to think about how, is that something this person frequently does, or is it just a coincidence? I would investigate that. The point of embarrassment, though, I think is it's kind of uncomfortable, and so it's most likely a way that we humans have evolved to keep our social structures and our communities intact. I mean, we've already talked about how important communities are. So if you make a mistake, the thing to do is just kind of own it, feel the embarrassment, and really understand like what and how it happens, and if it could have been prevented, and then do better if necessary or even possible, and hopefully you can just move on from it. Just feel it, process it, and then just move on. Like I said, if you have somebody who insists upon bringing it up over and over and over again, you might need to check that person. But if you're feeling embarrassed and there doesn't really seem to be a cause, that's very important. You should really explore that and seek to find the root of it, because you might be carrying around the weight of a past experience that honestly could be sorted through and let go. Someone I'm close to would often get stuck around this situation that happened when she was a child, and she got made fun of like right before she went up. She was going on stage to sing a song at church, and she got pretty intensely kind of bullied, really disappointed, and she just got up, and she was so disappointed when she got up. She just cried in front of everybody, like her emotions. She got emotionally overwhelmed, and she just cried, and she couldn't sing. So she kind of carried that embarrassment for years and physically could not speak or sing publicly. Like, just had this intense fear, and it didn't have anything to do with the fear of public speaking. It was that she was reliving that moment every time she got up in front of people. She would just, her body would relive that moment subconsciously. So obviously she didn't realize this until she was like working through it in therapy, and just, this, one of the ways she was able to work through it was remembering the incident and figuring that out, and then allowing the embarrassment to flow all through her. She just let it flow. She didn't try to block it. She didn't try to not feel embarrassed. She didn't try to protect herself. She let it flow, and she was able to completely feel it. And she did that a few times. She avoided the protective gestures, and just standing there in her power. And after doing that a few times and figuring it out, she was able to realize that she was just a child at that time, and the people who were picking on her were actually the ones in the wrong. And her getting up and crying was such a normal response at that time. So there's nothing to be embarrassed about. And she was able to stand in her embarrassment a few times, kind of therapeutically, and now she's able to sing and speak to audiences because she just needed to deal with that. So mad props to people thriving. I really love stories like that where people are able to figure it out and overcome it, but also give us stories and lessons of how to work through it ourselves. As always, when dealing with these things, seek out professional help if you find yourself struggling or getting over your head, or certainly if you find yourself thinking about endangering yourself. Please. I promise you, just seek help. I promise you. Don't abandon yourself like that. Seek help. I want to stop here for today because I think that this type of work is best in small doses. I'm going to continue filming the rest of the disgust words from the emotion wheel. So if the video is not up yet, it will be soon, within a week. I try to put one video up per week at this point. And that's all for today. So guys, thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.